When we met Evan and Bobby and we heard about their vision, they talked about how there was something missing from social media, how it had become almost like a highlight reel for your life, where it was creating this sort of performance anxiety for people. Unless they were looking pretty or perfect, they weren't putting themselves on social media. And that meant that instead of people being able to see the full 360 degrees of people's lives, they were just getting this tiny little sliver. And what Snapchat did by making delete a default was to bring back the spontaneity and emotion and authenticity of communication that people have always had with their close friends.
I mean, it was quite amazing. You then committed to 2 subsequent rounds, more than $8 million. What did you see in terms of the growth? What potential that now the market is questioning do you still see in terms of the growth trajectory?
Well, you know, when we first met the company, they had less than 100,000 daily active users, and most recently it's up to 158 million daily active users, so it's certainly grown a great deal. But what we saw at the time was this amazing engagement. People were using the app many days a week and many times a day, and that's just continued to be the case. So today people are opening the app 18 times a day. And when you see that, it's become a daily habit for people. And when you can become a habit like that, you can build really interesting and powerful companies.
But many are now feeling that the growth has fallen below 50% in the last quarter of last year. Is that something that you think will re-accelerate, or does it not need to?
You know, I think when you become part of popular culture and when you see that user base aging up, so it started off with mostly young women when we invested, mostly teenage women, teenage girls, I suppose. But today you see that that is being spreading to you know, people in their 20s and in their 30s and even beyond. And as you see that broadening, you can gain a lot of confidence.
What about geographically speaking? Because they've committed to the developed world only. They say you need high-speed, powerful phones. Where else other than the United States? We're almost hitting saturation point when you look at the US. Do you think there's more room to grow within the United States, but where also geographically?
If you think about the places that have high-speed internet connections today, it's the US, North America, which has about, I think it's about 70 million of the daily active users. Europe is also very big, and then rest of the world encompasses some of the parts of Asia that have more developed, you know, telecom, parts of the Middle East, and some other areas as well.
Do they need to expand past just Gen X, millennial? Do they need to lure the parents of Snapchatters?
Well, you know, if you take a look at Norway, it was interesting. Back in, I think it was probably the fall of 2012, Snapchat hit the top 3 in the App Store for Norway, and that was the one place that it got big faster than the US. And there you see it being used by people all across the spectrum in terms of age and gender, and it's really become embedded in the society. And so that gives you confidence that there's existence proof that this can be something that becomes used broadly by everybody.
And what about hardware? How much does that become an important factor to the business?
Well, spectacles are fun. I was actually just wearing them this weekend. I went skiing with my kids, and it was just the perfect way to be in the moment and to capture some of those memories without having it being intermediated with a phone between you and the experience that you're having. And so it's been a terrific experience.
I mean, Jeremy, I have to ask you, because there's been a lot of reporting about your own relationship with Evan Spiegel and Bobby Murphy. How is your relationship now with the business? Because it's felt that potentially some of the lack of shareholder control of Snap since it listed was in part because of some arduous, onerous points of view that you put on as a seed investor. Do you agree with that coverage?
You know, over the course of 5 years, there's going to be some points of friction in any relationship. And what's more important than that is whether or not you can work through it amicably and find a common solution that everyone feels good about, so you can work towards a common goal. And we did that with Snapchat, and I think today, while the IPO is certainly not the end goal, it's an important milestone for the company and one that I think is worth celebrating.
Do you think that the restrictions you put in place as a seed investor were onerous, or is it just what comes as part of being an investor when you're a venture capitalist and going into these very young companies?
When we first met the company, we were really clear with them that we were very interested in what they were doing, and we would love to continue to invest in the company in the future, and that's what we've been able to do.
You talk about the IPO not being the be-all and end-all, but a very key milestone. You've got, I have to say, looking at the companies you've invested in, you're in AppDynamics, so that was meant to IPO but then got caught up by Cisco. You're in already another one that's lined up at the moment, MuleSoft. Are we going to see yet more and more companies, particularly potentially from your own portfolio, that are going to list in 2017?
Well, MuleSoft is on the docket. Nutanix went public in September, and that's traded very well since then. Snapchat today. So the interesting thing is that a lot of these investments were made a long time ago. Yeah. 10 years ago for AppDynamics, 8 years ago for Nutanix, 5 years ago for Snapchat. And so this is the result of consistent hard work, working with companies as their very first investors. And while it's all coming to fruition now, it's the result of sustained effort over time.